All right, today we're going to go over your proportions notes. As I go over this, go ahead and fill in the paper notes that you picked up in class today. Our notes say, remember, a proportion is an equation that shows two equivalent ratios. For example, if you are comparing feet and inches, you should set it up one of two ways. You can either set it up feet over inches is equal to feet over inches, or inches over feet is equal to inches over feet. Remember, whichever unit you choose to put on top must be on top of both parts of the proportion, and whichever unit you choose to put on bottom must be on the bottom of both parts of the proportion. This is why it's very important to use the units and label your ratios. Example number 1 says, the label from a bottle of PEP vitamins shows recommended dosages. What dosage would you give an adult dog that weighs 60 pounds? So we can look at our information on the side, and it says PEP vitamins for an adult dog, 1 teaspoon per 20 pounds of body weight. So I'm going to label my first ratio. Since I put teaspoons on the top, I know that on this side of my proportion I need to put teaspoons on the top, and on this side of my proportion I need to put pounds on the bottom. The question is asking, what dosage would you give an adult dog that weighs 60 pounds? So 60 needs to go on the bottom because it is telling you how many pounds the dog weighs. There are two different ways that we can solve proportions. We can find a relationship between the two proportions, or we can find a relationship within the proportion. So first I'm going to solve it finding a relationship within. So I can ask myself, how can I get from 20 to 1 using multiplication or division? In order to get from 20 to 1, I need to divide 20 by 20. Whatever we do to one side of a proportion, we must also do to the other side of the proportion. So I must now divide 60 by 20. 60 divided by 20 gives you 3. So I know that I would need 3 teaspoons for a 60-pound dog. So solving this, we found a relationship within. Now I'm going to find a relationship between the two ratios. So I ask myself, how can I get from 20 to 60 using multiplication or division? In order to get from 20 to 60, I need to multiply by 3. Whatever I do to the bottom of my proportion, I must also do to the top. So I now need to multiply 1 by 3. 1 times 3 is 3. So our answer is the same. This is finding our proportion between. As you can see, no matter which way we solved, we got the same answer. So it's whichever way is easier for you. Sometimes you'll be able to find a relationship within, but you won't be able to find a relationship between. And sometimes you'll be able to find a relationship between, but you won't be able to find a relationship within. So you need to be able to look at proportions both ways. Let's go ahead and look at number 2. Number 2 says, what dosage would you give a puppy that weighs 20 pounds? So once again, we need to look at the information. It says that puppies, pregnant dogs, or nursing dogs get 1 teaspoon per 10 pounds body weight. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in my first ratio. Remember that we need to use our units. So I'm going to label 1 teaspoon, and I'm going to label 10 pounds. I'm going to go ahead and label the other side of my proportion so that I know that I write my numbers in the correct spots. All right, so now we can solve this problem going between or within. The question is asking, what dosage would you give a puppy that weighs 20 pounds? So I'm going to fill in 20 pounds on the bottom because that's where pounds are. And I can see that I I can get from 10 to 20 by multiplying by 2. So that's what I'm going to do to the top. 1 times 2 is 2. So for a 20-pound puppy, I would need 2 teaspoons of medicine. The next section of the notes page says to find the missing value in each proportion. So once again, we can look at this within, or we can look at these between. Since we can't get from 2 to 3 using multiplication or division of whole numbers, I'm going to look and see if we have a relationship within. I know that I can get from 2 to 6 using multiplication by multiplying by 3. So I'm going to go ahead and use that same relationship on the other side. 3 times 3 is 9. So n is equal to 9. Our next proportion is t over 11 and 5/10 is equal to 28 over 23. So I don't see a relationship within 28 and 23, but I do see a relationship within 11 and a half and 23. 11 and a half multiplied by 2 is equal to 23. So I know to get from t to 28, I also need to multiply by 2, which would mean I need to divide 28 by 2. 28 divided by 2 is 14, so t is equal to 14. And our last proportion is 1/2 to 7 is equal to 10 to b, so we need to solve for b. I know that to get from 1/2 to 10, I need to multiply by 20. Remember, whatever you do to the top, you must also do to the bottom. So we need to do 7 multiplied by 20. So b is equal to 140. All right, the next question says, set up a proportion to help you solve the following problems. Number 1, according to Ty's study guidelines, how many minutes of science reading should he do if his science class is 90 minutes long? So in this question, it's asking about science, so I know I'm going to be using this information. It says that for 20 minutes of reading time for every 60 minutes of class time. So our first ratio is going to be 20 minutes reading for 60 minutes class. I'm going to go ahead and put the units on the other side of my proportion. So we want to know how many minutes of science reading he should do if his science class is 90 minutes long. So 90 minutes is class time, so that's going to go on the bottom. So once again, I can either find a relationship within or a relationship between. I'm going to find my relationship within. To get from 60 to 20, I need to divide by 3. So to get from 90 to the reading time, I need to divide by 3. 90 divided by 3 is 30. So for a 90-minute class, Ty would need to do 30 minutes of reading. Number 2 says, Barbara's goal is to practice piano 20 minutes for every 5 minutes of lessons she takes. If she takes 20 minutes of lessons this week, how many minutes should she practice this week? So I'm going to start by writing my first ratio. I have 20 minutes practice for 5 minutes lessons. I'm going to go ahead and write my labels. The question is asking if she takes 20 minutes of lessons, how many minutes of practice? So we have 20 minutes of lessons, so that's going to go on the bottom of my proportion. So I'm going to go ahead and see if I can find a relationship within or between. I have one both ways, so I'm going to go within. I'm going to go between. To get from 5 to 20, we multiply by 4. So to get from 20 to the amount of practice we would need for 20 minutes of lessons, we're going to multiply by 4. 20 times 4 is 80. So for 20 minutes of lessons, Barbara would need to do 80 minutes of practice. Number 3 says, Michael can run 2 miles in 15 minutes. How many miles could Michael run in 1 hour? So we have 2 miles for 15 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and write my labels on the other side. So we want to know how many miles Michael could run in 1 hour or 60 minutes. I can't put 1 hour because my units that I'm using are minutes, so I need to put 60 minutes. I'm going to find a relationship between my 2 ratios. To get from 15 to 60, I multiply by 4. So to get from 2 miles to the amount of miles he could run in 60 minutes, I need to multiply by 4. 2 times 4 is 8. So in 60 minutes, Michael could run 8 miles. Number 4, a survey of shoppers at the mall indicated that 8 out of 24 shoppers eat at the food court when they shop. If there are 519 shoppers at the mall, how many shoppers would you expect to eat at the food court? So my first ratio will be 8 to 24. Our units are total shoppers and people who eat at the food court. Once again, I'm going to write my labels on both sides. So, our first ratio can be simplified. Both 8 and 24 are divisible by 8. So I'm going to go ahead and simplify this ratio to 1/3, or 1/3. This is called a unit rate because it's telling me the rate at 1 unit. Whenever you have a ratio that has the rate at 1, it will be called a unit rate. Now I can finish the question. It asks me if there are 519 total shoppers at the mall, how many would you expect to eat at the food court? So 519 is my total. And I'm looking for the amount that would eat at the food court. So I'm going to look for a relationship. I see that to get from 3 to 1, I divide by 3. This is a relationship within. So I'm going to see what 519 divided by 3 is. Three goes into 5 once. With 2 remainder, bring down your 1. 3 goes into 21 7 times. That's 21. With 0 remainder, bring down your 9. 3 goes into 9 3 times. That's 9. We have nothing left over, so we're done. So 519 divided by 3 is 173. So if there are 519 shoppers at the mall, we can expect that 173 of them would eat at the food court. That's all for your notes. Be sure to come to class tomorrow with any questions that you have from this notes page. And we'll see you tomorrow.